How many of us operate in gratefulness? When we receive something from someone that, you know, we need, are we grateful for what we receive from them? For our daily provision, do we thank God for what we receive? You know, do we always count our blessings and always have God in mind when, whether we eat or the bed that we sleep in, or anything else that we may take for granted? You know, gratefulness is hardly really seen in this world. I've witnessed it myself, as I was growing in Christ. I know in the past that I I could have taken things for granted. When I first got saved, uh, I think that I operated in gratefulness and I was thankful. I may have been a little selfish, but who isn't, who doesn't walk in the flesh when they first get saved? And until we learn that, you know, the flesh is not good and we need to operate more in the spirit. But that was something when I was younger that I didn't know about. I was learning. But as I grew, older in Christ, you hear those hymns, count your blessings, name them one by one. That's an old hymn, but it's true. It's something that we always need to remember is to, thank God for what we receive, and that daily. So that with being said, the title of this video is Being Thankful, Not Entitled. I witnessed many people who are ungrateful both in and out of the church. I recall when, I was hanging out with a good friend of mine years ago. We helped out at the mission, the food kitchen, and gratefully, they let us eat, right along with the homeless and stuff like that because we worked there. We served. One second. But what we did notice when we were working there is that, with the food that, they had for people, the homeless or those that were in need, there would be sweets, there would be cakes, bread, or whatever, and somebody would get a trash bag and would start shoving all the food in there, not thinking about anybody else. There were some that went into the mission, got their food. As soon as they received their food, I didn't hear a thank you to any of the people that served them. And that was a few people. But just the way that many grabbed the food, it was as if that they thought that they were entitled to it, as if it was owed to them. And that is not how we should operate. Now, I don't know what their history is in their lives, what happened in which they, were like that. But, taking it from somebody else that truly needs it isn't good. And that is not the actions that should be in Christians. But how many Christians do operate in that? So, like I said, they a lot of them take as if it's owed to them. And how many people do that today? They're struggling with something, bill or whatever, and somebody comes up and gives them the money for it because they feel, if they're a Christian, that this is what God wants me to help my brother or sister. So how many take it as if it was owed to them? I recall one time when I was And, I don't want you to think of me in a good light, you know, but I want to state this example to really make my point. But I don't ever want you to think of me in a good light. I struggle with everybody, like everybody else does. And, sometimes I struggle with the flesh, and it's something that God is helping me to deal with. So don't ever think of me as this, great and holy person, because I'm not. Nor am I trying to lift myself up. But I recall one time a brother was in need, and he had a bill that was to be paid. I think it was electric, and they were going to shut it off. One second. So when I was in my early 20s, when this happened, I really felt, I don't know if it was a nudge from God or it was me, but at that time I was working in a Christian bookstore, as a clerk, sales clerk. I would help people find the CDs that they want, something they would like. We would sell Bibles, videos, whatever it was. So that was my job. But I would get paid for the week, and I would pull out my tithe for Sunday. And then I gave what was left, I think it was like $50 or so, to this brother. So I give it to him. I don't ever recall a thank you on his part. And I'm like thinking to myself, gee, you're so burdened with this bill, but I don't see any gratefulness whatsoever that you're showing. It's as if it was owed to him. So, that really bothered me. Just the actions of some people. So, that's people for you, but it brings me to the example of God sending the Israelites meat and their actions in itself. You read further, and I don't ever hear a thank you from the Israelites. They weren't grateful, but they act as if it was owed to them. They were crying out that they wanted meat because there was some foreigners, I guess, among the Israelites. And so they, whether they were instigating just to get the Israelites in trouble, I don't know. But it got the Israelites, complaining to God that we're tired of this manna, we want meat. Oh, how it was in the days of Egypt where we had meat all that we wanted. So it's in Numbers 11. Let me pull it up. Okay, Numbers 11, the people complain, and I'm reading from the New American Standard Bible. Okay, now the people became like those who complain of adversity in the hearing of the Lord. And when the Lord heard it, his anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burned among them, and consumed some of the outskirts of the camp. The people therefore cried out to Moses, and Moses prayed to the Lord, and the fire died out. So the name of that place was called Taberah, because the fire of the Lord burned among them. The rabble who were among them had greedy desires, and also the sons of Israel wept again, and said, who will give us meat to eat? We remember the fish we used to eat free in Egypt, the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks, and the onions and the garlic. Now our appetite is gone. There is nothing at all to look at except this manna. Ungrateful. Now the manna was like coriander seed, and its appearance that of bdellium. I have no idea what that is. The people would go about and gather it and grind it between two millstones, or beat it in the mortar and boil it in the pot and make cakes with it. And its taste was the taste of cakes baked with oil. When the dew fell on the camp at night, the manna would fall with it. As we read further in verse 10, now Moses heard the people weeping throughout their families, each man at the doorway of his tent, and the anger of the Lord was kindled greatly. And Moses was displeased. So Moses said to the Lord, why have you been so hard on your servant? And why have I not found favor in your sight, and you have laid the burden of all this people on me. Was it I who conceived all this people? Was it I who brought them forth, that you should say to me, carry them in your bosom, as a nurse carries a nursing infant to the land which you swore to their fathers? Where am I to get meat to give all this people? For they weep before me, saying, give us meat that we may eat. I alone am not able to carry all this people, because it is too burdensome for me. So if you're going to deal thus with me, please kill me at once, if I have found favor in your sight, and do not let me see my wretchedness. 1 second. So the Lord gave him instructions, for the spirit that rested on Moses to be put on, I believe, 70 elders, I believe. And so he had them consecrated. Because this is what he said, consecrate yourselves for tomorrow, and you shall eat meat. For you have wept in the ears of the Lord, saying, oh, that someone would give us meat to eat, for we were well off in Egypt. Therefore the Lord will give you meat, and you shall eat. You shall not 1 day, not 2 days, nor 5 days, nor 10 days, nor 20, but a whole month, until it comes out of your nostrils, and becomes loathsome to you, because you have rejected the Lord, who is among you, and have wept before him, saying, why did we ever leave Egypt? So, God took the Israelites out of their bondage, which I believe it was 400 years. It might have been 400 or 200. So God was acting in mercy, delivering them through the hand of Moses. And that's the thanks that he got. One second. So now, God causes a wind to come and blow all the quail, I believe, from the sea and brought it to them. In verse 31, starting, now there went forth a wind from the Lord, and it brought quail from the sea, and let them fall beside the camp, about a day's journey on this side and a day's journey on the other side. All around the camp, and about 2 cubits deep on the surface of the ground, the people spent all day and all night and all the next day, and gathered the quail. He who gathered least gathered 10 homers, and that's not Homer Simpson, as you know. And they spread them out for themselves all around the camp. While the meat was still between their teeth, before it was chewed, the anger of the Lord was kindled against the people, and the Lord struck the people with a very severe plague. So, even before the meat was, it said, while the meat was still between their teeth, you don't see any record whatsoever of them, falling to their knees and thanking God and all that for what he has done. No, they just took it without gratefulness, as if it was owed to them. And that may have been why God was angry. So it says, so the name of that place was called Kibroth Hattaavah, because there they buried the people who had been greedy. From Kibroth Hattaavah, the people set out for Hazeroth, and they remained at Hazeroth. So, as you could see there, they were greedy. And there was no record whatsoever of them thanking God. And honestly, I don't know how I would have been before I was saved. But who I am now, in knowing the Lord like I do, I would have been so grateful just for even one quail, or even just manna, just having nothing in the desert, and then God raining down manna, by faith. I mean, having the faith that I do now, if God's sending me out in the desert, then I would reason in my head, okay, even before God or God causing Moses to say anything about sending meat or manna or whatever, I probably would have reasoned in my head that, okay, God is sending us out here, so he's going to provide. But that is not what the Israelites saw. Even with God opening up the sea and covering the Egyptians, you think that would have sparked something faith-wise in them. But apparently not. They were waiting for each little miracle without standing in faith for it, expecting God to just do everything. And that just really bothers me, and so, there are people today that act like that. They've received blessing after blessing, and there is no thankfulness. It's just, they go on for the ride, and, they're happy that they receive whatever they receive. And so they don't change. There's no clinging to what has happened that's good with them. They continue to take. They continue to complain about God not helping them. And none of the stuff that he does through people ignites any kind of faith. Instead, they hit every obstacle of trials that come, and they grieve through it without faith. And once they receive their provision or whatever, they take it without thanking God. And how many people have you seen personally that did that? And like I said, that there is no faith. I don't understand it, how just people don't thank God and they don't see how good he is. If anything, they complain about him. They ask God, where are you? Why do you allow this to happen, even after he's done good in their lives? And, they can't look at any kind of blessings that they have already. Instead, they just complain about God. But just to see what he could do through their trials and stuff, that would bring faith out. If they actually, if they're walking in, they need like a provision, like a bill to be paid, or they need food, and somebody steps up and gets them what they need, do they cling on to that and say, oh, I asked God for this, and he provided through this person? That should ignite faith in their hearts. But unfortunately, really, that doesn't happen. Because I've seen it where God had provided for people in the past, and it didn't spur any kind of faith. When you're focused on what God can do, and you're asking his provision, you're looking to him only. You don't know how he's going to bring it about. You wait in expectancy, and he comes through. And so that builds your faith up with each, circumstance. A lot of people, they just look for their needs to be met. Then they continue on in their comfort without having to walk in faith, without thanking God for what he's done. And, the burden that was on their shoulders that was so hard that they can't see how God removed that burden from them. And they're not grateful. So my question is, what will it take? This has to change. This thinking has to change. With the world, maybe God's bringing them personally through different circumstances, not only to know him, but to get saved and to show them who he is. But they are his creation, and it says in Matthew that he sends rain down on the righteous and the unrighteous. He blesses even the people that don't know him with good things. Now you think back on Joseph in the book of Genesis, which was Jacob's son. And God gave him a dream that his brothers would bow down to him. So Perhaps he got prideful, if I remember, and he started looking down to his brothers, and they got angry, and rightfully so. And so God had to bring him through humbling circumstances. He had to allow him to be taken by the Ishmaelites and put into jail, just to change this pride that he was walking in, until God humbled him. So that is what God most likely has to do with a lot of people, is that if they're walking in ungratefulness and they're not thankful for anything, he's got to bring a change to that. Now, no one should ever feel entitled for what they receive and the goodness they receive. They shouldn't feel like it's owed to them. Nothing is owed, especially in this world, and people will tell you that. It is God's goodness for everything that we receive, whether the world knows it or not. That's exactly how it is that everything that we get is a blessing from him, and it's a blessing from his hands. We should be thankful for, waking up and being able to do what we got to do each day. Some people may overlook that. It reminds me of when Jesus said, whoever is forgiven much loves much. And he said that about, I believe it was the prostitute. Because, she was weighed down by her sin, and so Jesus forgave her. And he gave a parable about that, so you can read that for yourself. And then I recall about a bunch of lepers that Jesus healed. One came back to thank him while the others didn't. And I think it was a Samaritan. And then I think about Naaman, when God used Elisha to heal him. And then he came back and he thanked Elisha for what he did. And so you see some examples in the scriptures of thankfulness and gratefulness. And, that is just the attitude that we need to think. We need to be thankful, and we need to remember daily everything that God does. We need to be thankful to him for our lives, a roof over our heads, food we eat, good health, going to our jobs in the morning, thanking him for salvation, thanking him for his love. There's just so much to be thankful to God for. So, let us not be like the Israelites, where they just took God for granted. They took what he did for granted, and it didn't spurn any kind of faith in them. Let us not be like that. Let us always remember that whatever we get and whatever we have, let us be thankful to God for them. And, just let us continue to show our thankfulness to the people that he brings in our lives, that, God uses to bless us. So, I want to create this video, and I pray that it has blessed you and give you something to think about. Thanks for watching.